as we explore the land of the Bible.
It was on a road like this that Jesus carried his cross. Archaeology is proving the accuracy of the Bible. I'm standing here on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, the very place I heard so much about in Bible stories as a child. Just 13 miles long and 7.5 miles across, it seems more like a lake than a sea to me, but it is so beautiful. Also known as the Kinneret or Lake Tiberias, it serves as the region's largest source of drinking water. But it was important back in Jesus' day as well, because it was on these very shores that Jesus found many of his disciples. And it was in the villages and cities that surrounded this water that he ministered, crisscrossing the lake in a wooden boat or walking the well-traveled roads around it. Jesus healed multitudes of people, teaching them in parables one day, then leaving the crowd and traveling by boat to the other side of the lake to meet the needs of a tormented man and casting out the demon from his life. But the amazing ministry that Jesus experienced didn't really start here as much as it started in a small village over the mountains behind me, a little town called Nazareth. And today, Amy Turnage and I are going to talk about the culture and the region that shaped our Savior in today's Israel moment. One of my favorite places to visit in Israel was Galilee, and just imagining Jesus, this man. I have to confess though, when I think of Galilee, I just sort of think of the Sea of Galilee, but it's much more than that. Will you kind of explain that?
Yeah, Galilee actually was the region, the northern region, and then the surrounding areas. So I also, most people do think just Sea of Galilee, but it included the Nazareth area and Jezreel Valley and certain other spots that surrounded that area itself. So it wasn't just located to the little towns around the sea.
Now, Jesus' ministry largely took place around the Sea of Galilee, but where he was raised was over in Nazareth, and really Nazareth wasn't much of a town.
No, it was not very big. It was about the size of an American football field.
Wow.
Yeah, with a population of maybe 400 to 500 people. Wow. So it was not a very big town.
And yet here comes this man out of this little tiny place. I've always been fascinated by the hidden years, as one of my friends calls them, those unseen years that we don't hear about, and yet they must have been so formative in Jesus's life. Can you talk about that a little while?
Yeah, we know that Jesus was raised in a thoroughly Jewish family. They were very pious. And we also know the surrounding area was very Jewish. We know that from archaeology, from coins that have been found, ritual immersion baths called mikvahs. They were found in the north there. Pottery that was found. Stone cups that were found that were used. Stone cups could be purified, like this one right here. Very cool.
I would never have guessed that came from Israel, because we're used to seeing the clay pottery, but this is a stone cup.
When a piece of pottery was deemed unclean anymore and not pure, they would just throw it out because it could not be repurified. However, stone cups, they could be repurified, and so you'll find these still whole in Israel in excavations. So you can understand that it was a pious area because you found stone cups there, and they were used and they could be repurified.
That's so fascinating, because in my head I've always thought of Jerusalem was the religious center, and that maybe these were just sort of religious people, but not necessarily devoted like the people in Jerusalem. But you're telling me, no, far from that.
No, it was the second largest area for learning in Israel. So, and they partnered often with Jerusalem. The sages often sided together with the sages in Jerusalem against those of Judah down below. So it was a very pious country and a very pious area where Jesus grew up. And the learning that Jesus had was extensive. He was brilliant and he had an excellent education. And mainly it was given from the parents. And so we know that his parents gave him a very good education where he learned languages like Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew.
You're right. You see all three, especially the Aramaic but I didn't realize that Hebrew
Yeah, Hebrew was quite a spoken language at the time. You'll find parables were only written in Hebrew.
Wow.
And the Dead Sea Scrolls are 85% Hebrew. And so it is found, and it's been disputed somewhat, but it's becoming known that Hebrew was the spoken language of the time.
So you know that he was well educated mainly because of what he speaks. Is that how you make that correlation?
Yeah, and he alludes to other writings outside of the land. He alludes to Aesop's fables in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And so you know that he was very learned and his education was very high.
That's so fascinating. You mentioned something about the parents being the teacher, but I thought Joseph was just a carpenter.
Yes, he was a carpenter, but we know now that carpenters were looked at as very high in their society level in the towns. If there was not a sage, there's sayings that go, if there's not a sage in the town, go and look for the carpenter. Because the carpenter was very learned. He was the artisan. He crafted his wares. He did it from beginning to end. And they were very learned. And so the fact that God chose Joseph to train Jesus was not by accident. Of course he would put him in a family with a pious father who would train him well. And that's what Joseph did.
That's beautiful. So when you speak of Jesus being raised in a pious family, how do we kind of know that?
Well, we know that Mary was very pious. It is said that after a baby is born, you have to go and do an offering in the temple to purify yourself. They lived quite a ways from the temple.
Yes.
And so many people didn't get to go more than maybe once in their life. Mary went at the very time that she could. Like 40 days later, she was there. And Joseph also giving his sacrifice.
Wow, I love that Jesus came from this tiny little town. You know, as a girl from Montana, I like that because I think sometimes we have this idea that we have to come from somewhere significant and be born into something significant. And yet God used it all to train his son to change the world. You know, when it comes right down to it, we are all shaped by the places we've been and the people we come from. But just in case you think that might disqualify you from ever being used by God, remember, God uses the ordinary to shape the extraordinary in every one of us. God chose the little village of Nazareth to shape his son, a place of which Nathanael, one of Jesus' future disciples, said, "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Just think what God could do with you and me if we placed all that we are in his capable hands.